Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Next Tax Stories episode number 58. And today my guest is Bernard Peeters. Bernard is a senior partner of Tiberghien tax lawyers, tax law firm, and it's located in Belgium and in Luxembourg, in some more countries. Bernard.
No, we are basically a Belgian tax law firm. We have indeed our offices also in Luxembourg, and we have a rep office in Geneva and Zurich.
Right. And Tiberghien is a tax boutique, the largest tax practice in the Belgian Bar Association with 125 lawyers, Tier 1 in Legal 500, and Bernard is their Hall of Fame in tax in Belgium. Tiberghien is also WTS Global Tax Network member firm, and Bernard is a member of the board there. And he has a special expertise in corporate tax, M&A, private equity, international and European tax planning, as well as double tax treaties. And you're lecturing at the University of Brussels as well. So would you like to add anything to this?
No, I have to skip something because I stopped teaching at university in Brussels last year. So I did it for more than 30 years, but there was a younger tax colleague who was really fond of being able to teach, and so I stopped it last year.
Okay. So do you regret stopping? Did you like it?
Not really, because due to the COVID period, I don't know how it is in your country, but in Belgium now, all lectures have to be recorded, which means that students afterwards can still watch the lecture, which is of course good for the students. But you see that the number of students who are present at the university has decreased, and so it's a little bit a pity that, in fact, you have little amount of students at the university and the lecture itself. And moreover, there was that big shift in international, because there was a part of international taxation that I was teaching. And you have been discussing about in your podcast also on Pillar 2. So I think a lot has to be rewritten and re-prepared for the students. And I think that was a good moment to introduce a younger colleague.
Mm-hmm. So you were teaching on international tax, yeah?
Yeah, indeed. I focused on double tax treaties. Because it has always been my specific point of interest, double tax treaties, since the beginning of my career. I have published a lot also with respect to double tax treaties, and it's still a domain which is my favorite domain in international taxation.
So normally we start with personality of our guest, but I wouldn't like to miss opportunity to ask your opinion about MLI. Was it a mistake or was it something really necessary, comparing to the traditional double tax treaties?
Well, I think on the one hand, I can understand that. I think there are more now than 3,000 double tax treaties, bilateral double tax treaties in the whole world. And if you really want to change international taxation, if you would have to do that based on bilateral negotiations, I think it would take years and years and years. So I can understand that the OECD was looking for a more efficient instrument to be able to change double tax treaties. On the other hand, what we see in practice is that the use and the application of double tax treaties today has increased. You see that I think that in the future mistakes will be made both by taxpayers and hopefully not by tax advisors. So it's much more complicated now to apply a double tax treaty. And I fear, and that's what I have understood, that there is a chance that there will be a second MLI. So if at the end of the day we will have the basic double tax treaty and then supplemented by 1 or 2 or 3 MLIs, then it will become really, really complicated. So I regret the instrument as such, how it has been used, but I understand why the OECD opted for such an instrument.
Okay, so your prediction is that it's just the beginning.
Yeah, in my opinion, it's just the beginning, and I think it's probably also a very very first step towards multilateral double tax treaties. If I'm well informed, we have only a few multilateral double tax treaties, especially in the Nordics. I think they are aware of it, and they have a multilateral double tax treaty. I think it will be difficult if you see, for instance, which difficulties that you have with tax sovereignty within the European Union. But I think in 20, 30, 40 years from here, I think we will have some kind of multilateral double tax treaties.
Mm. But going back to you, if we look back at your life, what are you most happy and proud about?
Well, I'm first of all most proud of the fact that I have a happy family. As such, that's of course the basic where everything starts and ends. So I have a daughter, and I have a son, and I have in the meantime 4 grandchildren. So that's the basic where you are going back at the end of the day, where you refuel. As far as professional life is concerned, I think that Belgium is a small country. I think we have not a huge economy as such, and I think based on based on the fact that I'm Belgian based, I'm proud to a certain extent of what we reached with the firm of Tiberghien, because when I started with Tiberghien in '90, I think we were about 18 to 20 tax lawyers, and now we are more than 120. So I think we did a tremendous development of the firm, and that's together with my partner colleagues, that's something on which I'm professionally very proud.
Mm-hmm. And any regrets?
Regrets? I think I cannot immediately say that I regret something. Of course, later on, it's always easy to say, well, at that moment, I would have better made that choice or that choice. But there is not really something that I every day regret. No, not at all.
Mm-hmm. And anything that inspires you in daily life, like books or podcasts or anything else?
Well, I have a good friend of mine who is teaching international leadership or leadership courses at an international level, and he was also a client of ours, and I have had a lot of discussions with him. So what interested me, apart from the technicalities of the job, also was the human factor. How do you deal with colleagues? How do you deal with younger people? What are you asking from younger people? What kind of liberty do you give them? And the fact of leadership, where you see some juniors entering the firm, knowing little about taxes, and after, let's say, 10 years, overgrowing you, is something which that's a kind of development that I always liked. So when you see, well, I invested and we invested as a firm a lot of time in younger people, and now after 10 years, 12 years, they are top tax lawyers in Belgium. That's something that I always liked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Any books you can recommend for my bookshelf?
No, because I'm for the moment I have read in the past a lot of text, of course, text journals, case law, etc. And I'm trying now, because I reduced to some extent my practice. So I try now to read a lot of other things other than text. One of the books, but that's perhaps from 10 years ago, that made a huge impression on me was The World is Flat. But I'm also trying to read a lot on politics, international politics, etc. But it is I don't have on the top of my mind now a book that I in English that I would say would recommend to you.
Who is the author of this? The World is Flat.
Who wrote that again?
I will look it up. Don't worry.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I just read the book by Simon Sinek, Start with Why.
Yeah.
And that had some good inspirational thoughts, at least for me. That basically for the main idea is for a company to be successful, it should start with why it exists, and to have some higher purpose. And then once you have this higher purpose, you can align all your strategies to that higher purpose. In Tiberghien, have you defined this higher purpose?
Well, let me first of all say that I'm also a big fan of Simon Sinek. I think we have our human resources manager who is always referring also to Simon Sinek. I think it's a great guy. If I'm correct, you were also at the annual meeting of the WTS Global Network in Singapore, and if you were in the room, you will recollect that I referred also to a video of Simon Sinek. I think it's a guy who is very, very inspiring, and I love a lot of his videos. And I think he's very convincing, very inspiring, etc. With respect to your question with Tiberghien, well, what we try to do, of course, is on the one hand, try to give to our clients the best possible services, tax services, but on the other hand, embedded in, I think, a number of ethics that we respect. So we try to respect so the balance between professional and private life of our colleagues. There are also a number of things, always a difficult discussion in the law firm, but there are a number of things that we have always said that we do not touch. For instance, we should be sure, especially in those days with the know your customer rules, that if, for instance, we do a inheritance planning, that the wealth of the client which is in front of us is tax-wise completely okay. So we have always paid attention not to be near with what could be considered potentially as tax fraud. So that was one of the aspects. Another aspect is, of course, which is difficult today. Do you work for companies who are producing arms, for instance? It's a difficult question. Do you work today for Russian clients? Is a difficult ethical question. That are difficult questions to deal with as a firm. But we have always tried to pay sufficient attention to that kind of ethical questions. And of course, there are a lot of other ethical questions that you have to deal with. But I think that are a few examples of them.
Yeah. I agree. In our firm, we of course, our purpose consists of two parts. One is success of our clients, but the other is prosperity of the country we work.
Yeah.
With this purpose, it's sometimes very easy to define, not only on the gut feeling level, what decision should you take. Should you take this client or not? Should you take this case or not? But you mentioned these tax fraud cases, and that's a very good topic because at the beginning, it's not very easy to tell? Is it real fraud or not? Is it is a client is involved or not? Did he know about the fraud and willingly was somehow involved or accidentally? So how do you define this?
Well, I think we have to make a distinction. First of all, if a client was not yet a client from our firm and has been accused of tax fraud and asks whether we can defend him before court, we have, of course, a department which is with a number of colleagues who are specialized in tax criminal law. Of course, we have also to respect there a number of ethical aspects. We do not accept every client there, but so that's one aspect. Do you defend? And of course, as a lawyer, I think we promise to defend all kinds of clients and to defend their rights before the courts. So we have a department, as I said, with tax criminal cases. On the other hand, if you are in the advice sector, advising a client, of course, we should pay attention, and especially if you have a firm with 120, 125 lawyers, that we do not even come near of tax fraud. And coming back to your question, what is the dividing line between tax abuse and tax fraud? It's more and more difficult today, so we are much more prudent, even more prudent than before. It's not always easy to define the line between the two. I think most of the cases are clear. So if something should have been declared in a tax return and it hasn't willingly, then of course there is a tax fraud. We see in a number of cases that the tax authorities in aggressive tax planning, where they consider there is abuse, they try also to defend that there is a tax fraud. And as you indicate, it's not easy to define the line, but fortunately that's the minority. It's perhaps 10 or 15% of the cases. In most cases, I think if you have a number of years of experience, you feel what is acceptable and what not. And I think it evolves also in time, because what was acceptable, I said, in 1980, for instance, isn't acceptable anymore today. So, but our job is becoming increasingly difficult with those anti-abuse rules, not because we don't like the anti-abuse rules, but because they are so vague. And they can, if you have 4 people in the room, you will probably have 6 different interpretations, and that makes it difficult. And that gives me the opportunity to make a bridge to another aspect, that is that the tax authorities, at least in our country, say, well, we need that kind of vague norms, because otherwise it would be much too easy to avoid them. But we will help you with the vague norms because you can ask a tax ruling. So we have, in the meantime, in Belgium, a well-equipped, well-functioning ruling commission. But the point is that I don't want, as a lawyer, to go for every question of my client to the ruling commission, because at the end of the day, if you have to go to a ruling commission for every question, then you can say, what is my added value? The client can go himself to the ruling commission and ask whether it's okay or not. So I think as a tax lawyer, I try to take my responsibility to say, I believe firmly that what you are doing here is not abuse and is acceptable under Belgian tax law. I don't think we need a ruling. But of course, if the client insists on having a 100% certainty and asks for a ruling, of course, we will do it. That's for sure. But I regret the evolution that due to the vague tax norms, more and more in countries who have a ruling practice, that clients have, or taxpayers have to go to the ruling commission.
I liked in Simon's book another episode as well that he mentioned debt collector, and that debt collector was working for one debt collection firm, and she noticed that actually people are really nice, all the colleagues are really nice, but once they start to talk to the debtors, they get nasty. The tone of voice is not nice anymore, and so on. So what she did, she established her own firm, and put as a target, as a KPI, a number of thank yous from debtors to those debt collectors. So,
Okay.
and this triggered the actions of those debt collectors, that they really wanted to talk to those people in a nice manner, understand their feelings, their position, and give some payment schedule according to their circumstances. And actually, as a result, the firm was performing much better than average in debt collection market. So this connection of the purpose to KPIs, do you have anything like that as well?
If I understand your question correctly, what we try to do at Tiberghien is to use in our relation with clients as much as possible what I would call professional empathy, which means that I think, first of all, we have a kind of rules in which way, of course, we deal with clients, how we invite them, etc., how we do the meetings. But if I'm referring to professional empathy, what I mean is you can have a client which is risk averse, and perhaps you should go to a ruling commission because otherwise the client doesn't sleep anymore. Or you can have some clients that, well, I'm an entrepreneur and I'm used to deal with some risk every day, so I can take some risk. So try to find out what does the client really wants, and that gives me the occasion to refer to an experience that we had. So for our partnership also, many years ago when I was managing partner, we decided to invite an external consultant in order to help us a little bit with the growth of the partnership and the problems who go that go with it. It was a famous external consultant, but he entered the room, and I remember that I explained that we had some, well, not really difficulties, but some issues that we would like, where he would help us. And he interrupted me and said, no, that kind of problems. And then he started to give his answer. And what I felt was that he was talking about a one-size-fits-all. I think he told the same story to all of his clients. And we didn't hire that consultant for the simple reason that I think what we try to do at Tiberghien also is that there is no one size fits all. So every client has its background, has its personality, has its own problems, and we try really to adapt our advice to all the kind of characteristics of the client, and that's what I call professional empathy. First, listen to the client, because what I have learned, Jan, is also both in my professional life and private life that one of the most, what I would say, difficult, easy things is listening. If you have a discussion, either in private or professionally, and you say something, you see that your counterpart is probably already thinking on what will I answer, etc., etc. And I had the advantage and opportunity to have a few friends, of a couple of friends who can extremely well listen. And before they give the answer, they first start to listen. And that's something that I have learned from them, also towards the clients. Listen to your client first. What does your client want? what kind of client is it, etc. And don't enter the meeting room with your client and say, I'm the lawyer, I will tell you what you have to do. No, listen first to your client and then use your expertise. That would be, and that's also an advice that I give to the younger lawyers.
Yeah, that's something I always struggle when I speak with my wife. But the trick is how to measure the satisfaction of clients when people are listening, when people are helping them. Do you ask for feedback after the case is finished, or is how do you do that?
Yeah, we don't do it, of course, with every client. It happens from time to time, so that we do ask to clients. And I often also ask to clients what was the reason that they are coming to our office or to a firm. Because, of course, we have competitors in Belgium. And I always try to answer the question, why do I have that client in front of me? And why is it not at the desk of one of our competitors? And I think it has to do with renommee of the firm, of course. We are existing for 80 years, but I think it has also a lot to do with personality of the lawyer that you have in front of you. And there are also a number of subjective aspects. I don't think that a client will come to you because he likes you, but I think that at the end of the day, there is some subjective aspects that of course you should have a good relationship with the client. And well, I have a career in the meantime of 42 years. If I would say you that I have never had a client who was not pleased, you would not believe me, and you would have been right. I think, but in most of the days, because I try to develop and use that professional empathy, in most of the cases, I felt whether the client was nervous, was angry, was or was pleased, or was very pleased, etc. And yeah, that's, I call it professional empathy. Try to feel your client.
I noticed you're a lawyer at both the Brussels and Luxembourg bar. How come it's also Luxembourg? Because of your office there?
Yeah. Belgium, I think it has reduced now in time, but Belgium often used Belgian clients Luxembourg in the past, both companies, both large companies and also private persons. And because so often we saw a link or a question from a client based on the link Belgium, Luxembourg, we decided to open a office in Luxembourg. And yeah, at that time we needed a few lawyers who were prepared also to be at the bar in Luxembourg, and so I was the Chinese volunteer. But I went many times, of course, to the firm in Luxembourg, and I always loved it. It's another way. But I thought that if you talked about Antwerp, you would refer, and that perhaps might interest you, refer to the fact that I'm also a deputy judge at the Court of Appeal in Antwerp, and that's something where in some countries clients are surprised, or people persons are surprised about. Well, there are a number of countries. Belgium is such a country. Netherlands is such a country. You can be a deputy judge, but of course you cannot sit in cases in which you have been advising yourself or your firm, or persons who are related to you, etc. But what I found very, very interesting in the fact of being deputy judge is that you feel much better the reasoning of professional judges, because you never, as a deputy judge, I never seat alone. It's always with two other professional judges, which means I cannot impose a certain decision. Of course, you can discuss with the other professional judges, but there is no risk that I would impose some decision as such. But it's interesting to feel and hear the reasoning of the professional judges, what is important for them, to what they are sensitive, etc. And it has helped me in the past, also in my private practice.
That's very interesting. I think that's a very good idea. We don't have anything like that, but I think that's very useful to have some professionals like you on advising judges basically on a neutral manner. So I think that's a great idea. And I was wondering how come that you are part of the judges, International Judges Association of Tax Law Judges, and this is why. I understand.
This is indeed why, and it's if I can make some publicity for the organization, the International Association of Tax Judges. It is, of course, open exclusively to judges, because otherwise it would not be an association of judges. But it's very interesting because you have high-ranked judges who are there from France, from the Netherlands, from the US, from Canada, from Poland, etc. And it's very interesting also to hear how other judges are dealing with some cases. And there again, it's interesting for private practice to see how judges, again, how they understand certain aspects, etc. And as said before, I will repeat it, it helped me in my private practice.
And this association, how does it operate? Does it have, I don't know, bi-monthly meetings or anything like that? Or
no, it has a newsletter. It has some digital presentations. For instance, tomorrow there is a presentation by the International Association of Tax Judges on the use of AI by judges, which is quite interesting, and I will certainly follow it. And there is one annual meeting a year, which this year is in September in Paris, and where you have 2 days seminar where a number of issues which are important for judges are discussed. And it's I have always found it very interesting, and so in most of the cases I have been present at those meetings.
Is there tax arbitration in Belgium as well?
So far, what we feel is, so we have a number of treaties in which tax arbitration is foreseen, but like in a lot of other countries, and I want to be prudent, but it's fair to say that the tax authorities don't like very much tax arbitration. And so therefore they try to avoid it as much as possible. But of course, in view of the European directive and the MLI, I think we will have at the international level at least more and more arbitration. At the Belgian level, we have also kind of, well, it's not really arbitration, but it's a department of the tax authorities who tries to bring together taxpayer and tax authorities and try to come to a solution with sometimes successes, sometimes they do not succeed. I think if I see, so cases in Belgium, you have first of all an administrative appeal with the tax authorities, then you have a tribunal, so first instance, and then you have the Court of Appeal. If I see what kind of cases sometimes come before the Court of Appeal in Antwerp, I have often the reaction, this could have been solved much easier and much earlier if from both sides there was some willingness to come to to a conclusion. And I'm very much in favor of such a kind of arbitration, because I will give you one practical example. So you know that in Belgium we have, in fact, two or three, I should say, different speaking languages. So we have the Flemish part, and we have the Walloon part, and we have also a small part where German is spoken. In Brussels, it's bilingual, and the French-speaking part of Brussels, if you go to the French-speaking Court of Appeal in Brussels with a tax case, a few months ago, it was mentioned in the press that there was a lawyer who got the date to plead the case for his client. Don't be surprised, at 2040. You see, at 2040. So, which means that so they are overloaded in Brussels, and too much cases. And I think that if you have a case which is, for instance, dealing with an income year, whatever, 2005, and you can plead your case in 2040, this is, I think, dangerous for the rule of law. Because the question is, do you still have a country which is respecting the rule of law if you are not able to settle a dispute with the tax authorities within the next 20, 25 years? So so therefore, I'm a big fan of all kind of arbitration.
Yeah. Sounds worse than India.
Yeah.
Switching topic, I saw you wrote about yourself thinking as a lawyer, acting as a businessman. What did you mean with that?
What I mean with that is what I always say also to younger associates is we do not give an answer to a legal question. We try to solve a problem, and not giving a theoretical answer to a question, for instance, whether such a merger can be done or whatsoever, just a technical analysis. What you and therefore I refer to what I said before, listening to the client. First of all, try to find out what the client really wants. And it happened that I said to my client, technically speaking and theoretically, this is the best solution to for your question. But in the meantime, we know each other since a few years. I know your enterprise. I wouldn't do that because there is a certain risk. And if that risk is realized, that's too dangerous for your enterprise, for instance. So I try often also we could give an answer to clients, say that is technically speaking the best answer. But knowing your company, knowing your employees, etc., that is probably not the best solution. And that's what I try to underline with that adage. So thinking as a lawyer, acting as a businessman.
If we stay a little bit with Tiberghien, would you tell us about all? If we switch in our time machine, something like 100 years ago, would you tell us about Albert Tiberghien, the founder of tax law in Belgium? Do you know something more? What did he do, and how did he establish the firm?
Yeah, I was lucky enough. He was already retired in '90 when I came to Tiberghien, but he came from time to time to the office, and he had also he bought a castle in the Ardennes, in the Walloon part of Belgium, and there was a house next to the castle where the employees of Tiberghien were also welcome. So when from time to time I did go with my family there, And then I had an interesting chat with Albert Tiberghien. I think the most important thing that he did was the following. I don't know, Janis, how it is in your country, but until I would say the 1950s, 55, taxes were considered as something for accountants and bookkeepers, and was not taught at the university. The only thing which was taught was I think inheritance taxes and transfer taxes, because that was very close to civil law. And he was the one, and the first one, who said, no, tax law is in first instance law. It's not a matter of numbers alone, it's law. And you have basic law principles that you should respect also in taxes. And he started writing about it, and he also approached taxes from a legal perspective, looking at constitutional aspects, looking at EU law, the impact of it, looking at double tax rates. So I think the most important thing that he did was teaching the Belgian society that tax law was law. That I think that's the basic what he did. And of course he had his firm, he opened his firm, he published a lot. Both in papers, but also in legal doctrine. He wrote a number of books also, and I think that's the most important thing that what he did. And I think that's something that his successors also try to further develop, to say tax law is law, and you have to respect a large number of principles in taxes. And I think he was very successful, and I think he is probably recognized in Belgium as the most important tax lawyers that we have had in the past.
Mm-hmm. And if we look at Tiberghien now, what would be the main principles you would say how to get to this tier 1 tax boutique? What is the reason for success for you?
First principle, what we try to do, and as I said, in 42 years, you don't always succeed, but don't compromise on quality. Don't compromise on quality. So what I hated, for instance, is someone as a tax lawyer says, well, I have a limited budget, so my advice will be limited also. So I think either you accept the case or you do not accept the case. And if you accept the case, I think you have to do the best efforts towards your client. And that's something that we always try to do. Don't compromise on quality. And the fact that we approach tax law as, in first instance, as law, the fact that we try not to compromise on quality, the fact that we give our young lawyers a lot of liberty is probably the reason why we attracted a lot of talent, more and more. And that's also the reason, I think, for our substantial growth in Belgium. But I think one rule, don't compromise on quality.
But then the next question comes, of course, I don't know about the billing culture in Belgium, but we see more and more pressure on fixed fees for our clients. And then it's a big question, can you maintain your quality if you have limited budget? So from you, I hear that's not such a big pressure yet.
Yeah, we have also more and more, I think, and I try to prepare the younger lawyers also. I always say to a younger lawyers, probably at some stage you will want with your wife or with your man, build a house, etc. And then you will go to an architect, and you will surely not say to the architect, well, just start drawing something and we will see at the end of the day how much it will cost. So I think if you compare it to an architect, and the client comes to our firm, for instance, for a well planning, you should not think that the client will say, well, that's my well, give some examples or try to find out some alternatives. And at the end of the day, we will see how much it costs. I think more and more clients want to know indeed what it costs. Fixed fees, we see it more and more in Belgium also. The difficulty with fixed fees, for instance, is often in an M&A practice, for instance, the client has sometimes the tendency to present something as being very simple. But if you have a further look at it with a legal eye on it, you see that it's far from being simple. But we have it more and more fixed fees. But I must say, in my whole career, I have not hesitated if I thought that we spend too much time, or that we spend too much time on a certain file, to reduce the fee and not to invoice all the time that we have spent on the file. But I must say, we, since 25 years, we do, for instance, a lot of private equity in Belgium. It's, in most cases, is based on fixed fees, more and more in Belgium. And I think it's a normal evolution.
Mm. We have been in the past of Tiberghien, we have been in the present. What about the future? How do you see the future of Tiberghien? Could it at some point become partially IT firm, for example?
Well, you know that even at the level of our network, we have the discussion. I think we are in front of a big evolution with, of course, the AI. That's for sure. But if you go back in history, there have been moments in the past where also, I think in 1850, 1860, when we had the first trains, the first machines, where the people thought, well, the human factor will become redundant in the future, and on the contrary, a lot of other aspects were or not a lot of other jobs were created. I think that AI will help us to find much faster the elements on which we base our advice. Like also a doctor will be able to give much easier his diagnosis because a lot of things are analyzed by the machine. But at the end of the day, I think for the next couple of 20, 30 years, I'm convinced personally that especially for the high-end advisory, that you will still need the human factor who is judging, especially if you are confronted with questions which have never been dealt with in the past. Because if I'm well informed, AI is based on information which is at its disposal. And I think one of the aspects, I told you before, that I ask from time to time to clients, what is the reason why you came to see our firm? And mostly I got the answer, creativity, which is trying to find a solution where no one else has found a solution yet. And I think that aspect will probably in the foreseeable future be difficult for AI. So I don't believe that tax advisory will become redundant based on AI. On the other hand, you see also the evolution where I think that a number of years ago, the OECD has written a paper on it, where the final goal of the OECD is that there will be, at least for large companies, a direct contact digitally between the larger firms and the tax authorities, so that all data necessary for making the tax assessment will be transferred automatically to the tax authorities, so that they don't have to make a tax return anymore, etc. So, but I will probably not be there anymore when that will be realized.
Maybe tomorrow you will learn from your judges panel something more interesting, how to reduce this from 2040 to something feasible.
Yeah.
But switching to tax topics, from your 42 years long career, is there any tax case or tax story that pops out in your mind that is something, I don't know, interesting, challenging, or funny, or whatever?
Perhaps I should think first of all about my memoirs and try to find it out. One of the things, I don't know whether it's funny, but it was, I think, the second or the third year that I was in practice, and I was at that time in the Antwerp office of Loyens and Volkmars at that time, which is now Loyens and Loeff. And there was a Dutch person, very wealthy, living in Belgium, and he declared the income of dividends, interest, etc. It was a large amount, and the tax authorities omitted to take it into account in the tax assessment, and they saw it too late to be able to still make the assessment. So we made an administrative appeal, and we said, well, your assessment is too late. You did not see it in the tax return, but it was clearly in the tax return, and so the tax assessment should be annulled. It took the tax authorities were very nervous about it, and it took some time before we got the green light, and at some day we got the decision of the administrative appeal, where they said, well, you're right, we were too late, so we will annul the assessment. And so, very pleased, I took the phone and I called to the client and I said, well, I have good news for you, because they accepted our appeal, and so you should not pay the tax assessment. And it was a Dutch family with specific background, and he said, well, Mr. Peeters, in the meantime, I've been thinking about it. I think it's my duty to pay the taxes, so I will pay them. And that was, and then came a difficult question, because then we had to say, yes, but since the tax assessment has been annulled, you cannot pay it, and if you pay it, it will be considered as a gift to the Belgian state. So I would say that is one of the stories that I remember from my younger days in practice.
Oh wow! Is a gift to the Belgian state taxable?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's
question.
That's an interesting story. Oh, yeah. I remember I was sitting in a bar with one of your colleagues, and we were talking about Belgian capital gains tax exemption for natural persons, and that was an interesting story. I heard that. Why is it still in force? Because there's no way to reach a consensus in the parliament to abolish this. Is that true?
Yes, yes and no. I think I think you should know that in Belgium we have, of course, like in every country, a number of multinationals, but basically the major part of the Belgian enterprise are family-owned businesses. And we have a tradition in Belgium that when the CEO of the family is retiring, that his pension is considered to be the gain that he is making when he is selling his enterprise. I think that's one of the reasons, at least in the past. On the other hand, what I always say, I know that most of other countries has also a capital gain tax, but that capital gain tax, what is often forgotten, is can't be too high, because otherwise you get a double economic, an economic double taxation. Sorry, Because don't forget that the assets that you have in the company, when the assets are sold, will be taxed at the corporate tax level. And if you sell the shares, it will be taxed at the level of the individual. So saying that there is no tax at all, I think is not true. But on the other hand, I must accept that most other countries have a capital gain tax. And I would say every 2-3 months, it's perhaps discussed by some politicians. And knowing the current situation of the budget in Belgium, I wouldn't be surprised that the next government will have no other choice than introducing it.
Okay, let's stay with a bar for a moment. I remember we were a couple of months ago. We were sitting in a bar in Singapore and sipping some nice beer and talking about life and business. What's your feeling? Why do you think Singapore has been so successful lately? Could that be partly to their tax system?
Yeah, I have understood, and that's over now, but there has always been a big competition between Singapore and Hong Kong. And I think 10, 15 years ago, I think companies tended more to go to Hong Kong than to Singapore for a number of reasons. I think today we have Singapore. I think that it's probably, well, first of all, most of our international clients who have companies, they want to have a kind of holding company in different parts of the world. And I think Singapore is a good location with respect to Asia. But I think, excuse me, I think it's also because that country or that state is very well organized. And it has, of course, also to do with the tax system there in Singapore. And now, so we know that there is pressure now on the territorial system due to the Pillar 2. But I think well organized, low rate of taxes, legal certainty, and the territorial system are probably the most attractive aspects of Singapore.
But in general, if we are looking at M&A, how does tax structuring now look like after all the EU restrictions and developments at the OECD and courts? Has it substantially changed comparing to, let's say, structuring 5 years ago?
Yes, it has changed, especially in Belgium, for a number of reasons. So first element that I had to say is we didn't have in Belgium until a number of years ago tax consolidation, which was in case of a acquisition also the difficulty. How can we reach a debt push down? How can we set off the interest which are based on the bank loan with the operating income was always a difficult question in Belgium. Now we have a kind of tax consolidation, but in most M&A cases, it doesn't help us for the simple reason that you have to, in order to be able to use the tax consolidation, you have to have held the participation for at least 5 years. So that doesn't help us with acquisitions. Another aspect is, of course, the limitation on the interest deduction. And also the anti-abuse provision, so the general anti-abuse provision that we have in Belgium. So, for instance, what we often see in M&A cases is that the vendor has to reinvest for a number of years part of the sales price into the acquisition vehicle. So we get now a kind of discussion by the tax authorities whether this should be considered as a non-taxable capital gain which is contributed to that acquisition vehicle, or whether it's considered to be abuse and therefore to be considered as a distribution of dividend prior to the sale. So that kind of discussion. And I don't want to be too technical, but it has changed, yes. And what I if I may, my colleagues won't know that one of the evolutions in international tax law that concerns me, and it doesn't concern me alone, is the growing impact of what is called soft law in international taxes. It's I have been educated in a legal system with strict legal principles, and we have also a very strict constitutional principle in Belgium. So no taxation without representation is clearly in our constitution, which means so if you have a tax law, it should be decided by parliament. And what we see lately is that although I have the greatest respect for the talent and the capacities of the people working at the OECD in Paris, but those people have not been elected. It's difficult to get in touch often with them. And you have a number of, it started with transfer pricing, but it's going much further now, that you get a kind of soft law. So Paris and the OECD in Paris deals or says how tax law should be interpreted, how it should be applied, etc. And I think there is something to say there. I'm questioning this every day, that growing impact of soft law. The tax rules who haven't been decided by parliament, but by a number of, that's difficult for the European Union, of course, because you have a legal system within the European Union. But as far as OECD is concerned, it's always something which is which I try to address and which I'm concerned about.
Do you see this as the reason why United Nations now are trying to get some say in this sort of being in fashion of being in charge of soft law?
Yeah, that might be the one of the reasons. I can understand that if tax authorities see a certain evolution, some tax structures which are used by taxpayers, that if they think that they are not acceptable, that that they say, well, the legal situation in which you have to adopt this through parliament is a long process. We want to be able to react quicker, and of course we want to defend our own interest and U.S. interest and Belgian interest and Dutch interest in etc. In a quicker manner, but we still have that principle: no taxation without representation. So I think it's important that because we have in our constitution so that every tax should be decided by parliament, but also every exemption. And if you don't respect anymore the no taxation without representation, you come in a situation where in soft law, so people who has not been elected or persons who have not been elected by the people could decide on either taxation or exemptions. And I think that's a dangerous evolution.
Right. I saw you are also a member of Invest Europe. I guess this is organization dealing with investment attraction to Belgium, correct?
Well, Invest Europe is the European organization dealing with the interest of the private equity sector. And it's because we do a lot of private equity in Belgium that we are member of Invest Europe, and that I used to be member of the tax and legal department of Invest Europe, and now it's one of my colleagues who has who is my successor there.
But regarding investments, does anything? Do you feel anything in the tax law really attracts investments, or what countries should do to attract more investments?
Well, What I see now, I think that but there are other persons better placed to judge it. But what I see now with the Pillar 2, Pillar 2 started with the principle, and I suppose that you have also read the book of Saint-Amand on paradis fiscaux. Well, if you read that book, you see the political difficulties that they have had in order to reach that agreement. So it's compromise on compromise on compromise on compromise in order to be able to say, okay, we have an agreement. And I understand that they wanted to act quickly, and you have that extremely complicated Pillar 2 legislation now. But what surprises me is that Pillar 2, in fact, gives only very little opportunities to individual member countries now to introduce tax laws for attracting investment. But what you see, it has shifted now to subsidies, which is outside Pillar 2. And what we see already now in Belgium now is, for instance, the northern part of France is a part where the country of France is giving a lot of subsidies to companies who are investing there. And so I think, is that now what we wanted to achieve? Okay, a minimum taxation in order to avoid a race to the bottom and perhaps an unhealthy competition between different countries, but which is replaced now by an unhealthy competition with subsidies, which means that the larger countries with deeper pockets are can give much easier subsidies than the smaller countries. And I think it's so we have an extremely complex system which has probably not reached what it wanted to reach, because you will still have that competition within the countries based on subsidies, and that's very strange to me.
Right. My last question is, have you been dreaming of some ideal tax system? How could it look like?
Well, yes. I think the ideal system is. That's your question. I don't know whether an ideal system exists, but first of all, I think that by the press, probably, and also by a lot of people, taxes are approached too negatively. They say, for instance, this entrepreneur has realized a capital gain of 100 million, and he only paid, for instance, 10 million taxes on it, or he didn't pay any taxes on it. I try to approach taxes positively, in this sense that I think it was one of the first presidents of the United States who said that taxes are a duty, a contribution that you have to pay in order to live in an organized society. So that's the reason why I hate tax fraud, because everyone has to contribute according to his means to an organized society. But if you have an entrepreneur who has been working very hard, has taken a lot of risks, etc., and therefore, if you add up all the taxes that he created, because his own taxes, corporate tax of his company, the wage tax of his employees, the VAT, etc., can't we address this a little bit positively, in this sense that you say this person has contributed so much to the society, instead of saying, well, he earned so much, he has to pay 50% to the state? No, he has taken a risk, and by taking his risk, he has contributed a substantial amount to the society. And that's one aspect. And the second aspect is that there is a friend of mine, which is Professor Bruno Peeters. He's the one, and I follow him in his ideas. His basic principle is always €1 is equal to €1. And what does he mean with that? He says, well, whether you earn the €1 as a dividend or as an interest or as a wage or as a capital gain, tax every euro, but do it at a low rate, or at least an acceptable rate. And I see today in the press in Belgium that there is no new OECD statistics that at least in one sector we are world champion now in Belgium. So we are the #1 in the taxation of wages or professional income in Belgium. So I would say make it much easier. Tax every realized euro, but do it at a much lower rate of whatever, 25, 28%, something like that. Much easier, no exemptions anymore, any realized euro taxable, with perhaps an exemption for those people who earn very, very little. So, for instance, that below a certain amount, you don't pay taxes, and above, you pay on any euro, but you pay the same rate.
Fantastic, Bernard. I guess we will have a lot of new topics to discuss over the next couple of beers.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
I think it's time. By the way, it's time for a beer.
Yes, you're right. But my last question to all the guests is always on philosophical note. What is your version of meaning of life? What is the purpose of why you do what you do?
That has been, or that's a difficult question, Janis, because I must admit that at some stage I asked myself, let's suppose that tomorrow there would be the nuclear bomb and I would be the only survivor. What can I do? I cannot even make a fork and a knife. So what is my added value in society? Do I have added value? On the other hand, on the days that the sun is shining and I'm a little bit more optimistic, I say, well, our task is to find that equilibrium between what the authorities would like to have and would like to take from the people and what belongs to the people. And I think professionally, that's our duty. Privately, I think for me, the meaning of life is trying for every person to find his moment and his place of luck, and that's different for every person. And I think privately, what I try to do is, of course, for myself also, but for my family, for my colleagues, for my younger associates, to try to help to create for them a moment of luck that lasts as long as possible. And that would be my meaning of life.
Great. Thank you for those wise words and for your time. Bernard, it's been a pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, Bernard Peeters, Tiberghien Senior Partner. So thank you very much, and see you over the beer somewhere in the middle of Europe, probably.
Thank you very much, Janis. And it was a pleasure for me to be able to discuss this with you. And of course, I'm looking forward to that beer with you.
Great. Thank you.